Welcome back to News in Focus. Of course, this week, as part of our discussion on News in Focus, we have been looking at the importance of wills, the drafting of wills, and of course, when death eventually comes to all of us, that our families and our spouse or guardians are looked after. Joining me today, I'd like to welcome from Dynasty Islamic Financial Advisory Service is Nafisa Suffla, as she is a senior wealth planner, to of course take this conversation forward. Nafisa, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and shukran so much for joining us.
Alaikum salam. Jazakallah for hosting me and for giving me the opportunity to speak to our viewers about the importance of having a will within the Sharia market.
No, alhamdulillah, and I think it's quite an important conversation. I think let's just break down, of course, Dynasty Islamic Financial Advisory Services and your role as a senior wealth planner and somebody who specializes in wills.
So I think just to start off, let me just quote a hadith from Bukhari. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that any Muslim person who has anything to bequeath should not go for more than 2 nights without having a wasiyah written about it. And like I said, that's from Bukhari. So I am Nafisa Suffla, Senior Financial Advisor at Dynasty Islamic, specialized in Islamic estates and wills. I've been doing financial planning for the last 10 years, and in the last 4 years have graduated as a specialist in Islamic wills and estates.
And I think it's how do I put it this way, a question that everyone would ask, but a lot of individuals will say, well, not really, we'll do it when we're much older. How important is it to have a will, even if you are as young as 18?
So I think the question is, why should one have a will, right? So for the first reason, as I've just mentioned hadith now, because it was instructed to us over 1400 years ago that we need to have a will. So secondly, if you have any assets, and what are assets? Assets are things that are registered on your name. So things like property, vehicle, cash in the bank, those things are assets. So if any person has assets, you need to have a will. If you have debt, you need to have a will. And one of the most important things that we overlook is having minor children. What happens to minor children when you pass away and you don't have a will that dictates or nominates guardians for those children? So very important to have a will if you have one or more of those things. Dying without a will basically means you die interstate succession. And the Interstate Succession Act in South Africa states that if you die without a will, the state then takes over in terms of winding up your estate. And there's a few problems with that. One of the problems is that your estate may not necessarily be wound up according to Sharia or your beliefs. It may take a long time in terms of winding up your estate. And again, if there's minor children that need to inherit from your estate, they cannot then inherit from your estate because the law says anyone under the age of 18 cannot inherit. It will go into the guardian's fund, and that basically means the state now looks after your children. And I don't think anybody actually wants that. So importance of having a will for all of those reasons, to make sure also that your estate is wound up expeditiously as possible and according to Sharia.
Nafisa, to follow-up question for that, I mean, when you are drafting obviously a will, what are some of the contents that are of course put in there? Someone may ask the question, well, I don't have any supposed estates or property in my name, but I've got other assets where, of course, even if it is a depreciating asset like a car. So just give the viewers an example of that. When you are breaking down drafting a will, what are the requirements that you are looking for from the person?
So I think it's important to understand how Sharia wills are structured. And the first thing is that we note that there's no specific assets that are actually listed in an Islamic will. And the reason for that is because those things change over time. As you've mentioned, a vehicle depreciates. So you mentioned to me today that you have, X, Y, and Z vehicle to this value, and in another year, 2 years, that car depreciates in the value, or you sell that vehicle. Now it's no longer a vehicle or an asset within your estate, and you haven't had the chance to update that will. It causes a problem with the master when we do, submit a letter of executorship in terms of that specific will. So So going back, we don't really list assets in an estate, in a will. We will nominate or we will make mention of guardians for your minor children. So if you have children under the age of 18 and you and their mother or the other parent pass away simultaneously or, within close proximity to each other, we need to make sure that there are guardians there to look after the children, because that follows a different process in terms of guardianship. So that is something else that needs to be noted in a will as well. And then the trust. So I spoke about the trust earlier on. Anyone under the age of 18 cannot inherit, so we need to note in a will that should you pass away while these children are under the age of 18, we will then set up a children's trust or a testamentary trust for these children. Now, what's the function of that trust?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to get to. Talk to us about that, because you've just mentioned now children's inheritors going to the guardian's fund. I think it's important to have these discussions, because at the end of the day, the children are carrying on the lineage of a certain person. So elaborate that for us, please. Yeah.
Okay, so children would be your natural heir, right? So I just quickly want to talk about heirs quickly. Who are heirs, right? In an Islamic will or an Islamic estate. So it's usually the people that you are from, so your parents, the person that's beside you, which is your spouse, and the people that are from you, which are your children. All need to be biological, all need to be Muslim. Obviously, except your spouse that cannot be biological, but yes. So that is your first step of heirs in line for inheritance, and then there's siblings in other scenarios, etc. But that's a conversation for another day, right? So let's talk about the children and children who are under the age of 18 and they now need to inherit from your estate. The law says that anyone under the age of 18 cannot inherit. So what that essentially means is that if there's no will, number one, or if there's a will with no trust details mentioned in that will, those children or that child's inheritance will go into the guardian's fund. And that's a government fund. And that means that the government is now been put in place to function as you, as the parent, to see to the child's financial well-being. And that can take a long time, or it can be difficult, to get the funds out. So we have to then put up a trust or make mention of the trust. You pass away, we set up the trust, whatever the child is due will go into trust. And the function of the trust is to look after their child financially. Also to safeguard this child's inheritance from abuse, from guardians, from government, from whoever it is. And that is essentially what we need to do, is we need to look after our heirs' inheritance, especially our minor children, until that trust then vests, where they can then now approach the trust and then take out whatever they need from the trust.
Definitely an important conversation, especially when it comes to that for children. Nafisa, how does one go about drawing a will?
All right, so firstly, you need to nominate or you need to appoint, someone whom you trust, number one, and someone who knows Sharia as well as legal law in terms of drawing up your will. You need to then appoint an executor, again, someone who you trust, someone who knows how to wind up estates, or appoint an organization or your financial planner or someone that does estate planning as the executor to wind up your estate. Remember, being an executor takes a lot out of the person's time. So they may have to leave work and go and sit at the master's office. They have to take time out of their life to sort of wind up your estate. So it takes a lot of time out from that specific person. So when nominating an executor, you need to make sure it's someone who knows what they're doing, someone that can wind up an estate, and someone that has time, actually. As executors also charge fees. So by law, they're allowed to charge a fee to wind up your estate. So it's important to appoint someone who, can fulfill all of those obligations and also negotiate the fees with them upfront in terms of what they may charge against your estate to wind up that estate. So going back to what we said earlier on, no specific information in terms of assets, in terms of values go into an Islamic will. We don't nominate or we don't name the heirs in the will as well. We have to nominate the guardians, so the guardian details, the trust details again. And that's basically what an Islamic will is. And that's how you structure an Islamic will. The reason we don't put all of that information into a will is because those things change over time. So at death, we will look at what assets you have available, what debt is there against your estate, and who are the living heirs, because only living heirs can inherit from your estate.
In 1 minute, Nafisa, just the importance of just this week itself and why wills must become part and parcel, not just of every person's life, but especially a Muslim's life.
And again, and I'm going to reiterate again, is because it's an instruction. It's an instruction from our deen, from our Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, who said, you have to have a will if you have anything to bequeath, and it's to safeguard. And it's not just paperwork; it's that last act of ibadat that you are leaving, for your family. We all try and live, as good as Islamic lives and as good Muslims as we can. And why, at the time of death or at that time, not leave a legacy that Allah will be happy with? And I think that reason alone is sufficient for us to do what's correct in the most correct way as possible.
Nafisa, absolute pleasure hosting you here. Jazakallah so much for making the time for us, for educating us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. That's Nafisa Suffla. She's a senior wealth planner at Dynasty Islamic Financial Advisory Service. Up next, we wrap up the conversations in terms of Wills Week with Shaheen Suleiman, who is the head of Absa Islamic Banking. Do stay tuned.